Okay, I'm going to talk to you about a few things concerning reliability as it pertains to assessments. Reliability in general is something that we all depend on. We assume and take for granted that our cell phone will work, our car will start, McDonald's fries will be, good if they're hot, our airplanes and flights are on time, our family's going to be there, and our computer doesn't crash. And when reliability fails in real life, then bad things happen. So when we think about reliability in terms of assessment, it's going to really refer to how consistent measurements are between instruments and raters, within instruments and raters, and when I say instrument, I'm meaning tests, quizzes, or whatever it is that you're using, and over time. Okay? Now, excuse me, in assessments, we refer to, at least I refer to, reliability as applying to assessment results and to the instruments themselves. Popham in the text focuses on just the results. In my opinion, some assessments are just more reliable than others, and I don't know how you would get around that, and we'll talk about that as we go forward in the class. Reliability refers to several types of consistency: internal, inter-rater, intra-rater, external reliability. You need it for validity because if you're all over the place and sometimes somebody gets 100 and they take the same test and they get a 50 and they take the same test again, they get a 70, that's not really reliable, and I don't know how confident I would be in making judgments about what that student really can or can't do. And then we typically assess it using some sort of statistics, really using correlations. So a quick thing about correlations. Correlations really just look at the extent to which two variables kind of hang together. If we have a positive correlation, that means when one thing increases, the other thing also increases. And if we plot out each person on each measure, we would find a line sloping up from the left to the right. A negative correlation slopes down from the left to the right. And basically that means when one thing is going up, the other thing is going down. For example, the amount of money you spend, as that increases, right, the amount of money in your savings account continues to go down. That's a negative relationship. Zero is no relationship, and it really just looks like a big cloud of nothing. Some examples: education and salary. Well, those two things are positively correlated. Study after study shows that on the average, people who are better educated make more money in their jobs. Now, this isn't true for everyone, but correlations don't mean that it has to be true for everyone. It just means that in general, this is the type of relationship that exists. Eye color and the number of children somebody has? Not really, especially if we focus on the U.S., not really a correlation at all. Time studying for a test and the number of errors on that test? In general, this is a negative correlation. The more you study, the fewer answers you will get wrong. And then health and happiness is a positive correlation, but really not so much until people are in their older years. But it is a positive relationship nonetheless. So the question is, I'm sure that's on your mind, how can this be helpful to you? First, you can tell if standardized tests are any good. All tests have a little item analysis, a little reporting section about all the different statistics they run on the test to make sure that it is valid and reliable. These days, in order for a test to be published, the reliability typically has to be pretty good. If you're using some older assessments, however, this was not always the case, and some pretty terrible assessments, very unreliable assessments, kind of get through. One of the things to note is that assessments in general with young children will be far less reliable than the same types of assessments with older children, just because of attentional things, and you're trying to get the kid to do something, and they might be grumpy, sleepy, have to go to the bathroom, whatever, right? And they don't really have that self-control. The questions that you really look at are the results consistent across time? So if somebody takes it on Monday and takes it again on Wednesday, assuming they didn't learn anything, is their score really going to be the same, or is it going to be all over the place? A second consideration is across different versions of the test, and this is the idea of alternate forms. If I have two separate versions, version A and version B of a test that I'm giving, or a standardized test has multiple versions, how do I know that I would get reliable results if I gave both those tests to the same person? If I gave two equivalent tests, I would hope that the person would score exactly the same, but that is not always true. And so the question is, what makes the difference between the two scores? And these two types of reliability are really the test-retest or stability and equivalent forms. It can tell you if your own assessments are any good. One of the main questions, do different questions with the same content result in students with very different scores? You need some kind, and you expect some kind of variability with student performance. However, excuse me, if you have incredibly different scores for students that you think are supposed to be the same ability level, then you have to wonder why. In the sense of test-retest equivalent forms, we can apply this into the classroom. In terms of split half reliability, this is something that we typically won't be talking about that much. I'm going to go over it, but I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it. Finally, you can tell if alternative methods of assessment, like portfolios or performance tasks, alternative assessments, need to be operationalized. And when I say operationalized, it means that you need to come up with a very definite and well-defined scoring procedure and criteria for making judgments. The thing with portfolios and performance tasks is that you usually have some person judging things based on a loose set of criteria. You're relying on human judgment, and humans are biased. Humans have preferences. People don't use the same criteria or the same levels of criteria. And even if you have a group of scorers and you look at their same scores over time, they vary a lot, and they're not that consistent with themselves. The types that apply here are really equivalent forms. Are my portfolios, performance tasks, and paper pencil tests really equivalent? And the idea of percent agreement, which we're not really going to talk about, but it's a way to measure what percentage of the time do multiple raters all agree on the judgment that they give when they are grading something like a portfolio or performance task, or anything that requires human subjective judgment. We're going to talk about a couple of reliability methods, and these are the ones that I want you to make sure that you understand, at least to some extent, all of them, but stability, alternate form, inter-rater, and intra-rater are the ones that I want you to pay the most attention to. Stability is the idea that if I give somebody the same test over and over and over again, assuming that they are not studying, they are not getting fatigued, they are not getting distracted, their performance, their ability is not changing, I should get the same exact score every time. And when you think of this in terms of, say, you were shooting free throws in basketball, right, and you shoot 10 and you make 8, you shoot 10 again, you make 5, you shoot 10 again, you make 9, right? Very different. Even though your ability as a basketball player hasn't changed, there is just some randomness that makes you do things better one time and not as well the next time. What stability does when we measure it is it gives us a measure of how much your test is influenced by external factors, by things like random guessing, by things like natural variations in performance, by motivation, by climate, by time of day, by hunger, by distractors, and so on. Because there's all sorts of things that go in to why you get the scores that you get and why your students will get the scores that they get. Stability or test-retest reliability lets us kind of quantify that. Alternate forms reliability is really when you give different versions of the test that are supposed to be equivalent to the same group in close succession. Do they score the same? Again, you don't want to have them get tired. You don't want to have them get bored or distracted. You don't want them to have any practice. So you're trying to filter those things out. But the idea is, if, again, people have the exact same ability, and they take version A, they should get the same scores when they take version B. If they don't, well then you have this reliability issue, and it's an alternate form reliability issue. And even though it's never perfect, you want to make sure that they are reasonably close.